Now back to one of our top stories of the night, the death of former Texas Governor Mark White here in Houston today. We're joined by our political analyst, Bob Stein. Thanks for joining us, Bob. Well, so how are you going to remember Mark White?
Well, in many ways, Mark White defined my life in Houston. I came here the year he was elected Attorney General, 79-80. Of course, he went on to be governor and only one term, but I think he represented to me the transition of Texas from a traditional Southern Democratic state to what we now know as a red state and a solidly Republican state. I think I remember him most famously for bringing Ross Perot into the national political stream. If you remember, it was in 83, 84 that the governor asked Ross Perot to be his chairman of an education reform commission. There were a lot of proposals that came out of that and a lot of money spent in education, but the one that was most famous to all of us was No Pass, No Play, which prohibited students who had not done well in school from playing sports. And that turned out to be a very controversial issue. Some thought it hurt his reelection. I was polling at the time for this TV station. I recall, and I looked at my notes, it was a big issue, particularly in West Texas, traditionally Democratic base. So Mark White probably was as courageous as Ross Perot, and it, of course, propelled Ross Perot into making himself a household name in Texas, and, of course, defeating our own President Bush in his reelection against Bill Clinton.
Now, do you think that will be Mark White's legacy, no pass, no play?
I think it'll be the thing about his legislative record. I think for those of us who study politics and get maybe a little bit more perspective and time and years, Mark White will probably be remembered as that transition of a traditional conservative Democrat who moved to a more liberal position. Mark White particularly exercised the death penalty in the state. He was quite aggressive and many years later came to regret it. But as a Democrat, as a governor, he pushed some very progressive legislation. He was the first to talk about border security and immigration. He was to talk about diversification of our economy, which in 1980 was all oil. 90% of our economy here in Houston was. He started talking about the medical center. He started talking about high tech. He also talked about the need to educate not just white people in our state, but to recognize that we were becoming a diverse, racially and ethnically diverse state. So he kind of talked about that. Of course, Ann Richards is the last Democratic governor of our state. Ironically, in 1990, Mark White actually ran in that primary. We forget Ann Richards, of course, won that primary, went on to defeat Clady Williams, but then she herself was defeated. And since then, this has been a red state.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob Stein. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we caught up with Mr. White along the Texas-Mexico border last month. He was there quail hunting, but we took the opportunity to get his thoughts on immigration. Here's what he had to say.
These people want the same thing that I wanted, my family wanted. They just have to be born there, not here. It's every attribute that you want to see in a good citizen is revealed to you in those people who have come here.
For much more on the former governor's life, head to our website, khou.com.